Today in EVE Online, it is September 20th, 2019. You are talking in stations, and I am Adderall. All right, so we have a scope video to go through. It's kind of interesting, has a little surprise ending. We'll check that out. For you that are listening to this, you can find that on YouTube under EVE Online channel. And we'll describe what happens in it. We'll also talk about a battle that just happened or didn't happen. And that was in the staging of Fraternity, which is an alliance that leads Winter Coalition. That whole coalition was under attack by a separate coalition, or actually three, called Legacy Coalition. And the fight didn't happen, basically. So people alarm clocked for nothing. We can talk about the dynamics of that. Time zone tanking, or time zone defense, is a big deal in EVE Online. So there you go. Okay, if you're just arriving, welcome. I'm going to just finish getting set up here. I will be silent for just a few seconds. You can speed up the video, maybe 30 seconds. All right, let's start out with this video called Blackout Lifted. We'll talk a little bit about what's in it and see what's going on.
Bandwidth and usage limitations on faster-than-light communications in nullsec were lifted by the SCC earlier this week. This marks the end of the 2 months blackout, which was primarily caused by drifter attacks on FTL infrastructure and quantum-entangled 4-helium supplies across nullsec. While communications have now been fully restored, Concord officials warn that communication service levels remain subject to change, possibly at short notice. The Triglavians have expanded their invasion into low-sec regions as Khanid, Aridia, and Moldenheath have come under attack in the last week. Reports from the fronts are mixed, but defenses seem to be holding. Low-sec systems in Genesis and the Forge have also been hit by new attacks as the Triglavians continue their pattern of shifting attacks around New Eden. These new fronts are in addition to continuing incursions into high-security space by Triglavian world arcs and widespread scouting forces. The scope has acquired new footage from a previously unknown abyssal dead space pocket. The imaging data appears to show an array of construction yards with a high level of activity. There are no completed ships visible in the footage, but comparisons with the Vexor, which entered the pocket and provided the footage, suggest the Triglavian ships being constructed can be rated as capital ships. The structural components that have been laid down so far also appear to correspond to schematics from intercepted Triglavian messages. The intention behind this new shipbuilding activity remains unknown, but analysts believe the Triglavians are responding to the course of the war so far and preparing to change their tactics. In other news, extensive renovations and a major expansion project have started on the Jita 4-4 Caldari Navy Assembly Plant. Contracts for all aspects of the project were recently awarded to the PKN Interstellar Consortium, led by the CBD, LIDI, and NOH Megacore. By far the busiest trade hub in New Eden, the expansion of the station has long been considered overdue. The amount of daily traffic and storage requirements have caused overstretch for years, and much activity unrelated to trading or the naval facilities has progressively been relocated to other stations in Jita. The project's phased program of expansion is expected to take at least 12 months. This is Alton Haveri reporting for The Scope.
Hello, did you see? So they animated Alton Haveri. There it is, Alton Haveri. And so he pops out at the end and leans towards the camera, and it's like, who's this hunk? So I thought that was pretty funny. Nice little surprise at the end of that. Yeah, it was hilarious. So we'll just leave his portrait up so people can see him. It doesn't look anything like you would think. You know, the actual reader probably is got curly, messy hair, unshaven, with glasses. But you know, CCP's modeler is only able to make super fit and attractive people. So what can you do? Thank God for us, right? So yeah, so that is the scope video that just came out. It's called The Scope. dash blackout lifted and talks about blackout. Am I being quiet again? I have it at max, so I have to make some adjustments. All right. It's really terrible that we wrestle with volume issues. I blame OBS. OBS like has really crappy ranges. Goes from really quiet, I suppose, to like too loud in the red, and it's a very narrow zone. So you have to like stay in the same position, speak at the same tone, and it's not natural. So bear with me and let me know, just like you did, if the voice isn't coming through properly. Okay, I'm going to bring in some friends here to see. Let's see, I can just grab this guy. Hello, Bard Ghost. There you go. You're unmuted.
Hello? Hey.
I kidnapped you because I want to go over the scope video, and there's some fun things in it besides Alton Haveri.
Weird to put a face to the name, even if it is a fictional character.
Yeah, one of the problems I've had is that they use the... well, first of all, it's really cool that they made this animation. Somebody worked hard on that, and it was really cool. And it was a great surprise. It was fun. It was a little fun thing to see a news reporter animated inside the thing. My problem with the whole concept of showing avatars in EVE Online is they're all dressed like they're going to a nightclub or something. You know, there was a time where they were really trying to integrate players into the scope videos. So they would take their avatars of the actual players and put them into scenes, and then they would use that as part of the scope video. And it was a way of making the connection that players were actually doing the important things in EVE Online, and therefore they could be used as reference points in these scope videos. But again, the immersive breaking fashion in EVE Online made it look like that just doesn't make any sense. So they would say something like, the top scientists in New Eden have figured out this lore thing. And then you go to that image of them, and it's a bunch of guys like getting ready to go out to a nightclub. It just didn't work.
Wearing a vest top or something like that.
It's just ridiculous.
It seems really out of place.
Yeah, they look like bikers, you know, top scientists. They dress like bikers. So that's a problem with, I don't know. That's a problem with the game. Sometimes in general, it has a limited perspective on futurism. And it kind of shows like in that sort of thing. What I would have done is normalized all their clothing in some way, but I don't think you could force that sort of thing. So they're using technology that they have to try to do something that doesn't quite work, although it's a great idea. And I think it's very interesting to try to get players involved, but it doesn't quite work, and it breaks immersion for those of us that are looking at this and like the sci-fi world. All right, Bard Ghost, enough of that little criticism. Again, Alton Haveri at the end there, showing him animated and moving towards the camera, was hilarious, and it was a nice little touch that they did. I'm sure a lot of people got a kick out of it, like I did. So I brought you in here because I wanted to go through this video and see if there was something something to be talked about in here. I think one of the first things is that Blackout is lifted, and that's a big deal. We've talked about it all week, sometimes in a heated way. We won't do that today. But at the time that it was presented that it would be lifted, they said, or Falcon, CCP Falcon, who's the lead community guy, said, well, Blackout will now just be a part of history. And to me, that was a signal that Blackout had come and gone. It was an experiment, and now it was over, and therefore it wouldn't come back. And Hilmar had said similar. He said it was always meant to be a temporary thing. Don't assume that CCP caved to players, because it was always meant to be a temporary experiment. They just couldn't tell you it was temporary because it wouldn't work. People would sit out and wait for it to be over. So Hilmar himself came on and responded to a tweet that I put out saying it was always meant to be an experiment. And then we also this week described a few episodes ago what that conversation looked like and where it went on Twitter, when it was very interesting conversation. So now they say with this Blackout video that the lights or Blackout can come and go. There's no promises either way. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Full admittance, I may have missed that in the video. I know it was in the Scope article the other day. I was more focused on the ticker at the bottom of the video.
Oh, I see.
Because they hide all sorts of goodness in.
All right. Well, we'll skip the Blackout. Maybe we'll come back to it later. Maybe we've talked about it too much already. What's on the ticker?
There's references to the Jita rebuilding. There was a couple things about Carnid in Tucky because there's something going on with them. The one that stuck out to me though was, I've just lost my train of thought. Sorry. Garista's pirates fighting Triglavians in Caldari Losec. I think, bar from the references the other day of the Moksha Chorus and the Triglavians kind of fighting them, this is the first time we've seen other factions bar the Empires pulled into this as well.
Yeah, what do you think?
So it's... Sorry, you go.
What do you think's going on with that? Are they setting up to introduce that NPCs can actually fight each other? We know it's possible, but it's not happening in any kind of controlled way.
Yeah, I think they're slowly going to play everyone in and use it as a way to overhaul the AI, right? And then they all fight each other in some way, shape, and form.
Yeah. There's an article that came out talking about an incident that happened a while ago where CCP was testing artificial intelligence to see if these things could learn to fight each other. I don't know if "learn's" the right word for it. It's not quite artificial intelligence. It's more like, well, maybe it is, right? You have parameters. They can work within a set of parameters. They have certain behaviors. I think
it's advanced decision trees that. Yeah.
Right. It's hard to describe because I think of artificial intelligence as something that is some algorithms that are capable of learning, and that requires memory, which I think is different than a very, very detailed skill tree.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what CCP is working on, because AI is like impossibly hard, is just really, really interesting choices that an NPC character can make. So while they're testing this and refining it and working through situations that it might encounter, it turns out there was this fight between two NPC parties. Nobody was around. This was just the game fighting itself. And as they were fighting each other, I think a drifter patrol came in and wiped out everybody. I think that's what happened. So you had 3 groups of NPCs fighting, and one group just came in and dominated. One of the 3 came in and just dominated the situation, and nobody saw that. So what they did is CCP had referred to that as part of the an interview somewhere, and it was called like the biggest fight that happened that nobody saw kind of thing. And it's pretty interesting. So if they're saying that in lore now, by using this little what do you call that? Little ticker at the bottom. It's like news that's scrolling at the bottom on this video. They put in little hints about what's going on in the world. So if you ever watch these scope videos, always read those tickers because they're little hints about what players are up to or what the game's up to, or they're just kind of trying to flush out EVE Online's IP, the universe, tell you what's going on in the universe.
Yes. You saying players, one of the first ones that scrolls by that you see is Villy's offer to the Winterco alliances of peace, right? And that's just one of the first to go by.
Which makes you realize just how current this is, because that happened only 2 days ago.
Yes.
Yeah, so it says here, Test Alliance leadership delivers ultimatum. And that was something that we talked about a couple of shows ago. Or was it yesterday? It could have been yesterday. I don't know.
It's that recent.
Yeah. Okay, and so that was pretty interesting, and current. All right, somebody just jumped in, and I may switch topics here because there's an opportunity to talk to Cable, who is somebody that has reason to be upset as of lately because something that he was up to in the game is being nerfed. So I'm going to unmute him for a second. How's it going, Cable?
All good.
Can you talk louder?
Not really. I don't want to shout.
All right. So that's your top. All right, I'll just turn you up.
I mean, I'll kind of like slightly louder, but it's not going to get much louder.
Yeah, okay. That's good. You're fine. I just turned you up. So tell us, what is it that had you upset the other day? What is CCP changing, and how does it affect you?
They essentially just took the blueprint caches that drop from NPC Sotios and increased the volume of them from 20,000 M3 to 400.
How does that affect you?
It means that you can no longer loot it with a DST or a Roquel or a jump freighter for that matter, or a Titan for that. You are now limited to only looting it with actual freighters, so T1 freighters.
Yeah. And this is the second time CCP has done something like this. The first time they did it with Keep Stars, the only way to move a Keep Star is to use a freighter. That's the only ship that can carry it. And a freighter is incredibly vulnerable, so it can be destroyed. So putting up a Keep Star is no easy task. You must have support to do it, unless you do it in complete secrecy. But even then, you're risking 200 billion or 180 billion now, probably. So for you, this is CCP looked at this thing that they had. They put out this mechanic called the, well, I don't know what the mechanic was called. It came out in an expansion, but it's called Blood Raider Sotio. And the Sotio is...
Angaristas.
Angaristas too, right. But the Blood Raiders were first. And when the expansion came out, they have the Sotio, which is an engineering complex. It's the same thing that players can have. They can have these things, and it is the biggest of its type. There are 3 different sizes, and this is the largest one. So that Sotio builds capital ships, super capital ships in sovereign space. And this is an NPC version of one, and what you're supposed to do is attack it, and it defends itself, again, using this really complicated AI decision tree technology that they're using. So if you bring more to fight it, it will produce more ships to defend itself, and if you destroy it, you get blueprints for some of the capitals and super capitals that are inside of it. And you only get 1 or 2 per drop. And it's possible you might get 1. I think it's possible you will always get 1, I think.
No. It's not a guarantee drop.
So it's random.
It's essentially it's a loot table which has a potential for nothing. But it's a loot table also has a potential for 2. Most of the times it'll drop a single of one of the 3 possible ones for their given race. Mm-hmm. But it's occurred multiple times that nothing drops. I had a time where 7 in a row didn't drop a thing.
Wow, 7 in a row. Now, are these things something that you destroy, or do you just wait to snag the loot when it is destroyed?
I have almost killed as many as I've stolen.
Wow, okay, so you're well acquainted with this. All right. So once you destroy it, the loot drops. And it used to be that it was just a blueprint, which meant it weighed nothing. And so the very first time it dropped, somebody was able to scoop it up like with an interceptor. And they, of course, didn't give it to the FC that ran the operation. He ran away with it, logged off, transferred it to a different alt, and then sold it on the open market for the billions and billions, maybe tens and hundreds of billions that it was worth. Actually, these things can get up to, I believe when the Garistas ship came out, it was worth 400 billion for the blueprint.
It's still worth 400 billion.
Is it still 400? So it hasn't. Wow.
It started at 550, has hence gone down towards about 400.
So was it 550 when it started? Okay. Was that true for the Blood Raider one too? The very first Blood Raider one?
The very first Blood Raider one went for, as far as I recall, about 800 something.
Wow. Okay. Wildly off. So it started out as a huge payday, right? So the point is that you want to get that loot Very few people can get it by themselves. You need a group to do this. And when this all first started, you were able to pick it up with just an interceptor, so people were able to snag it right away. And then they said, okay, well, an interceptor is too small to grab something like that, so we'll make it. What did they make it into?
They first turned it straight from the normal blueprint side, which is 0.1 M3, which is I can agree that that's kind of dumb. Into 20,000 M3, which means you are forced to either use deep space transport or bigger huller, or a capital, or sorry, not a capital, what's it called, a Titan.
Right, but something bigger, not just not just something that could snag it. And you perfected a way of being the spoiler and being able to snag the loot out from under the people that had destroyed the facility. Right?
I wouldn't say perfected, because there are very easy counters to it. Mm-hmm. The only thing about it is that people seem unwilling to put the effort into using those counters. And as I've explained on another stream last night, actually, I taught a group how to run Sotios like 3-4 weeks back. And within 12 hours of them running their first Sotio, they figured out a way to deny me the loot 100% of the time. I will never be able to stop them from looting faster than I am.
Oh, so they
have the runner's advantage.
So they found a counter to what you were doing.
Yes.
Okay, so what is it you were doing?
I'm not going to disclose that, I'm afraid. Not at least not until the change is actually in play, because until then, I'm obviously going to make use of it as much as...
You're still in business until then?
Yes.
So don't give out the secret recipe.
Not just yet. There's a video in the making for it.
Oh, okay, cool. We'll look for that. But what the result is that you've found a way to grab this thing with a ship that was able to handle it, right? Because it was big enough that you couldn't use a quick small ship to do it, but you could use a deep space transport, you said, or something else. And those industrial ships. Okay, and so now CCP has gone one step further and said, okay, that's still not enough. What we'll say is you can only pick it up in the largest cargo capacity ships in the game.
That's correct.
Yeah. And your thoughts on that?
I think the change itself is stupid, because it disincentivizes what made this game interesting as a sandbox, because theft has always been a big thing in this game, because, stealing is legal and scamming other people in the game is legal within the confines of the game. And essentially they've, to an extent, completely eliminated that. One of the other reasons why I think it's really bad is that it's provided people who are more interested in griefing the people running the Sotio, who obviously wants to loot, with a lot more power to do so, instead of actually making it like a contestable thing. So, for instance, as you probably know, the rats that spawn from this empty Sotio are pretty hefty. They will ruin you if you aren't ready for it. And so you have to warp in a capital-sized ship that is notoriously weak in any capacity for defending itself, and has no tanking ability, really. And you have to bring this onto an extremely hostile grid, and all it takes to deny it leaving said grid would be literally a dictor, for instance.
Mm-hmm. So they could... So what do you think this does to the dynamic or the balance of this feature?
I mean, I personally think that it's going to kill people's willingness to run the Sotio. Because all it takes, again, is me in a probing dictor to catch their freighter as it warps in to pick up the loot, and then it dies.
So you think the loot is still in grave danger in this situation?
Oh, no. It's in grave danger of being destroyed more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
So no one's going to win. That's essentially the outcome that we're going to get. That everyone just loses.
Yeah. So I think CCP's idea initially was that they would make this high value, again, when it started out, it was 800 billion for this one thing, and you could grab it.
Only the first 2 or 3. But yeah.
Right, because the novelty wears off. and what happened is I think CCP's deal was, because people said, hey, that's a lot of value for one thing. Why don't you reward more people than just one thing? And they were like, they kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, oh. And I think what they wanted was there to be some drama based on who gets it and make that a variable as well. And now they're saying, okay, we'll protect it so it doesn't get just ripped off. But now it's very vulnerable to destruction. And I wonder if people will also fight over it, because when one drops and a freighter shows up to pick it up, there's a juicy target.
Well, yeah, sure. But like, I feel like it seems like an odd mechanic of especially in my personal thing, is that I feel the making the change, as far as I've been informed, based on a willingness to nerf a single individual, in this case me, sounds like really poor decision making from the game development team.
Oh, so you think this rule came into effect because you did your job pretty well?
No, I know that that's the case.
Really? How do you know that?
The only reason why this has been brought to CCP was because Villy has a member base who've been, quite frankly, bitching and moaning about me for months on end now.
Mm-hmm. And
I have, if you want, I can provide fucking 100 pages of logs from that.
Well, just describe them. You don't have to provide them.
The TLDR of all of it is essentially I am using a looting script, and therefore I'm cheating, which I am not. So yeah, whatever. And
you're not using a looting script, or you're not cheating?
Neither.
Okay.
Because both would be illegal. And so the TLDR is that they think I'm cheating, and they argue that they have evidence that I'm cheating because of my success rate. And they argue that they have tried everything, which I can tell you for a fact is untrue.
Mm-hmm. Because your guys figured it out.
Mechanics are... Well, yeah, exactly. I taught some friends how to run Sotios, and they figured out a way to beat me 100% of the time in 12 hours. So like it's really a question of they told Villy and kept nagging Villy to bring it up to CCP, and I mean the change to 400,000 cubic meters in volume is funny because it matches exactly what a guy here on TIS, Ron USMC, has been proposing for an extended period of time.
Oh, I see. And do you think that, so they told him you got to bring this up to CCP, and of course Villy is now on the CSM, which is counselors from the player base to talk to EVE Online directly to development issues and feature issues. Do you think this is related to that access at all? Or
definitely, because it was brought up at the CSM summit.
Well, how do you know it was brought up at the CSM summit? The minutes aren't out yet.
Because I've been told.
Okay. Well,
I don't like hearing about leaks. Leaks scare me.
Yeah, well, I mean, within the confines of the CSM, it's not been it's not a leak in a sense that they've not given me actual information on what was said specifically, but they've given me information who actually brought it up and who was inside of that group that had a conversation regarding it.
Okay, so
and I know that Villy brought it up because it was one of his pointers of things that he really wanted to change coming up towards.
Okay, so and the takeaway from all this is you feel like that was valid gameplay. It was in the spirit of EVE Online because, of course, this is a place where you can scam and trick and that sort of thing. Even though this wasn't even scamming or tricking, this was just being faster. Yeah. So it's within
the mechanics of the game, and I take advantage of some mechanics of the game that they seem to have been unwilling to or unable to, for some reason, to take advantage of themselves. And I've had a long conversation with Astarothi about this yesterday, actually.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. When the minutes come out, we'll look into this and see if it was brought up. It's an interesting patch note that is coming out that does it make what you did impossible?
Entirely.
So you're completely locked out after this?
Yes.
Is there anybody else doing this sort of thing? out there?
There is 4 different people or groups or however you name it.
Mm-hmm. Are you? Could we say you're the pioneer of this? Were you the first one doing it, or did you see somebody else doing it and say I could do this a little bit better?
I don't think I was the first one doing it. I started doing it like 2 months ish after they came out, and I think 3 or something had been run prior to me starting. And I don't have 100% success rate, and if there was such a thing as a loot script involved, I would assume that I would have 100% success rate. Like, just that makes sense, right?
Right.
How much ISK have you made off of these scams so
far? It's not a scam.
Well, I mean,
but
off of the thefts.
From thefts alone, approximately 2.3 trillion. From running them myself, another 2 point.
So
that's a lot of money.
Yeah,
it is.
The ISK involved seems to be okay. When these things first came out, there was of course some superstition that of course it's the Blood Raiders. That's where the Imperium is, right? And then the Imperium and Test. So these things will be farmed like crazy, and they did kind of figure out how to destroy these structures relatively quickly. One thing they couldn't do is secure the loot necessarily, although they did, I think, a good job of that. Then the same mechanic comes to the northern part of the map, which is Garistas, and you have the same situation. But one of the things that was a chief complaint when they first came out was there's a lot of people at work here, and you're not really rewarding them. It's too much concentrated wealth in these things, and guess what? Nobody wants to play them, so they're not worth doing. In other words,
and if I recall correctly, the first one that dropped was immediately ganked by an interceptor that had nothing to do with the fleet that killed it. So it was from the very beginning. This was a
defending fleet.
Yeah, I think Tess stole it from the Imperium and was killed in the process, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so it's from the beginning, stealing these things has been a pretty fundamental gameplay aspect of the whole Sodio. So it is troubling when they make changes like this that impact the current play style.
Well,
given the amount of ISK involved, I can understand why they would.
I mean, I could understand the argument that it's unfair that a single person makes this much money, but at the same time, let's assume, just hypothetically, that they were doing this with 10 guys or 20 guys for that. If they actually put the effort in and divided this between 20 people, it's not exactly a little amount of money. We can all agree on this, I assume.
Yeah.
Because it would still be 20 plus billion a person if you're doing 20 people. Mm-hmm. So I don't see how putting a lot of effort in from these 20 people would be like such a high demand, considering the amount of effort I put in when I run them myself, for instance.
Mm-hmm. And there's no guarantee that they're going to split it up, right? They're going to sell it, take the ISK, and then split it up among themselves. Like, it could be that an FC says, yeah, that's mine. Thank you very much.
I mean,
we can easily go to alliance. This is for SRP type stuff.
That's entirely the approach the test actually took, that they were going to take like more than about 70% or something to the alliance SRP wallet, which they clearly need when they already have Tranquility Trade Hub and general ratting taxes and so on, but whatever.
Right. But this is it's an interesting thing to look at, especially from your perspective. There are very few things that a few players, like one or two, can do to these great empires that are being built in nullsec, right? Like there's very few impactful things that a small person can do to a large corporation or a large alliance, and this seemed to be one of them.
I wouldn't necessarily anymore think that raw ISK is a major impactor of major alliances anymore. Probably. I feel like CCP allow for the super proliferation and roll calls and yada 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 and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily think the raw ISK amount is actually going to have any impact on the bigger alliances and coalitions anymore.
They just have too much money as it is.
Well, and resources, yes.
And resources.
I will argue that, yes, the ISK obviously does make an impact, considering that I've practically been funding the Winter Coalition War on my own for a while almost. But,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So given the fact that it's going to be much harder for you to go in and steal these things, but it's very easy to interdict someone. Well, it's good, but it's easy to stop somebody from stealing them. Are you gonna take that as a challenge and go stop these guys from looting it all?
Oh, definitely. I've already on Ashtarathi's stream last night. Actually,
Here's Ashtarathi.
I've already proclaimed that I've already injected probing dictator pilots, and I've injected a numerous amount of extra dictator pilots, and I'm just going to park those in the Sotia systems. And whenever they're running them, I'll add more dictator pilots into the system, and then it's literally just going to be me griefing anyone who tries to actually loot the Sotio.
Ashtarathi, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Really good. You know what we're talking about, right?
I've caught on, yes.
Yeah. Your thoughts?
I think it's an interesting problem. I think it really comes down to what you value in the situation. So on the one hand, you have a group of people who have organized themselves and brought forth the ships and all that stuff, and they feel like they deserve the fruits of their labor. And then on the other hand, you have a person who has spent a lot of time perfecting his technique and understanding the game in a way that other people don't, and he feels that he deserves the fruits to his labor. And I think that it would be nice to see a good amount of play and counterplay. And what I said last night is that I feel like this is almost like CCP giving up rather than making that interaction interesting in some way. Instead, they're just making it so that one side just can't do it. And but on the other hand, what it really does is it makes it so it's the statement, he who controls the grid can have the loot, right? It's not enough for somebody to just come in and grab and bash it, or whatever. It's not okay for somebody to steal it. Like, you have to have the ability to control the entire system long enough for the entire operation to occur, which I think is also interesting. And then finally, I think that the biggest part about it is if his activity is suppressing it from being ran at all, if people are opting to not run it because they don't know how to deal with it, then I think that CCP at some point almost needs to step in and help. Otherwise, they just need to accept the fact that that feature is doing what it's doing. I don't know if they're necessarily content with that reality in the long run.
And I think that's what frustrates me the most, because in my experience, or at least in my opinion, this represents the standard sandbox style of gameplay that EVE has been traditionally about. It is the game that lets you gank. It's the game that lets you scam people. It's the game that lets you steal from people, and that's okay. And now they are implementing mechanics that are designed to nerf that, instead of just doing what every other game does, which is say, oh, well, that's not okay. So it's kind of like, it's like the hard way around doing this stuff, and it rubs me the wrong way.
It's almost an inelegant solution, and they just turn something off.
Right.
Where have I heard that before?
I wonder.
Could it be Blackout?
Maybe.
All right.
I mean, I think overall it's starting to annoy me that we're seeing so many instances of the referees coming in and stifling emergent gameplay because somebody doesn't like that it's happening to them, and that.
Yeah, but I think
not even my.
Looking at it, and I know the reality is different than the perception, but if you just look at perception, and I'm not trying to create a narrative here. I'm looking at it analytically. Nullsec that dominates CSM seems to be getting what they want lately, and I think that message in public, if people aren't careful to know there are other factors involved, is not a good message for EVE Online. When a certain group of players starts to run the game is over. And this change here seems to be motivated, according to our friend Cable here, by CSM, by a group of nullsec guys that said this is not really fair for us, and from their perspective it wasn't. And then it gets changed in in the game only a few weeks later, or maybe it took a long time. I don't know if this was going on for a while, but the point is they got their way. Blackout was something that hindered their gameplay and demotivated a lot of their players from making money and having the advantage of being able to do it on a large scale. And that gets reversed. And so these start to add up to, like, who runs this game? And these are all in nullsec, by the way. That's it. So high sec, low sec, totally different. But this is all nullsec.
I understand. I understand Cable's, philosophy of, obviously Billy brought this up and everything, but I would be very surprised if this was a CSM instigated change. At least not something that happened in a formal meeting, because
It doesn't work that way.
The other members would have said, "Are you seriously going to sit here and tell us you want this nerfed because they're taking loot from you?" They would have been. I mean, Billy would have been laughed at by Aerith and the rest of the guys, because that type of self-serving stuff is not okay and generally is frowned upon. Now, that's not to say he didn't mention it to somebody behind the scenes at the bar that night, but man, that's a quick turnaround if they really did that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm surprised.
As far as I've been informed, they did have a formal conversation, at least, about it.
At the table.
I'm not certain. I don't know whether that formal conversation was at the bar or whether that was like sitting in a meeting and having a discussion about it. But I know that the participants of this meeting, and I know that multiple of the CSM members were like, I don't really give a shit, but
Well, we can look at the minutes and see if it actually gets mentioned there.
And I really, really hope that's wrong, because I know you're saying it's not a leak. That is textbook leak. There is no way you should know what was being said about you in the room.
Yeah.
If that's the case, and fair enough that they may not have mentioned me then. Let's assume that's the case then.
Let's just assume that we don't know. Let's start there.
We don't know anything.
I think that's a good.
And we'll find out when the minutes come out if it's in there. Because usually if a change is in the game, they do not redact that section. So if this did come up, they won't take it out because it's already part of the game and there's no advantage to knowing it. So it'll probably be in the minutes when they come out, because they're coming out after this change is in the game. By the way, when does this change hit the game? Is it already in?
There is no release date. It's just an up and coming change. It's on Hobo Leaks essentially. The change is on Hobo Leaks, which means that it's probably going to be on the next iteration of CC.
So I haven't seen an announcement about this.
There is no announcement about it. It's just on Hobo Leaks. So
it's not. Yesterday on Hobo Leaks, they updated it and brought in a whole bunch of new stuff, up to and including this change, or 2 days ago, or whatever it was. There's no patch notes, there's no formal announcement, there's no dev vlog. It's just we saw the change and immediately certain people knew what it meant.
What is Hobo Leaks, just for people that don't know what that is?
Hobo Leaks is a website that keeps track of changes on the data that is running on Singularity. So, for instance, if CCP makes increases the amount of shield the shield extender gives, that will instigate a change in the code that is running on CC, and therefore Hobo Leaks will highlight it and say this change is occurring, and this is what it was, and so on and so on.
Oh, awesome. Usually, my explainer is Ash Dorothy, because I like when he explains.
Sorry.
But he nailed it though.
Did he nail it? He did, right?
I mean,
I was going to say, do you have
anything
anything
to
add?
Singularity, it's all of the different Eve clients, but it basically takes a diff, and so it'll tell you the difference between any given client and any given other version of the client.
Well, it's locked to TQ and CC now, but it used to have duality. CCP locked that off because they use that for internal.
I will say this to you, Cable. The fact that they have not put this in a dev blog and they have not made it a formal announcement about it, and it's just a data change on CC, means you may be able to stop it if you make enough noise.
Oh, I'm intending
to.
I don't think
this is a locked-in change yet. So yeah, I mean, I would get out on Reddit, get out front of this, and complain and say, hey, look, these guys are nerfing emergent gameplay. Why is this okay? And make a big enough stink, and maybe they'll roll it back.
Well, the problem about that specifically is that I on Reddit am not a very person. First of all, because they can just brigade vote my post down to the ground and I'll never get any traction. Secondly, the common consensus is that because CSM members has publicly went out and streamers have publicly went out, Ron included, and stated that I am cheating by using a loot script or something like that, some other mechanic.
Not necessarily
But
true.
that's for CCP to decide.
I-
not
Oh
for
no, of
the
course,
general
of course. But my problem is that you have public figures announcing this guy is cheating.
Well,
and
no,
because I haven't provided evidence I'm not, I am.
Talking in stations, I actually came out and said, okay, so let's review this. And I reviewed it and said, and so he's using a loot script to do this sort of thing. And everybody that was in that room said, no, we don't know if that's true. So they were trying to be exact. And I think Ron was included in that, if I'm not mistaken. But in any case.
I'm talking on his stream, sorry.
Oh, okay. So in any case, there's the issue. It's interesting. You should go on Brisk's show. Open comms.
We would just get shouted and drunk together.
Yeah. But anyway,
sorry about yelling at you last week. By the way, Matter.
You still feel bad about that?
I still feel bad about that.
It was fine actually. You yelled at Dirk worse, so I was okay.
Well, Dirk deserved it. You
didn't. Thank you, Brisk. I appreciate it, and my feelings were not hurt because I'm a big fan. So I was not. It was not phased, and I probably needed to be told that. Well, that's not true. I hate that. Yeah, abuse me. I deserve it. Forget that. Okay. What I want to do is, thanks, Cable, for showing up and talking about that issue. It'll be interesting to see if it actually goes through. And
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Hobo Leaks is something that people check out. It's full of spoilers. If you don't want to know what's going to happen in EVE Online, don't look at Hobo Leaks or listen to people talk about it. But as long as we're here and it's already out in the open, Ashtarothi, what's going on with Hobo Leaks? Or Bard Ghost 2 or whoever's read it?
Boy, there's a lot.
Interesting stuff, yes.
I think that, well, there is a new set of the Mimesis implants. We have the mid-grade Mimesis implants now available on the DED store on Singularity. There is a new Triglavian site. There appears to be Triglavians in footholds are now assembling something known as the Stellar Laboratory that, when assembled, seems to project status effects, including warp speed and other things outward, probably into the system itself. We're not 100% sure.
Yeah, we haven't seen it play out. We just know it's there.
Yeah, although that conversation did prompt certain people at CCP in my channel yesterday to muse about the idea of a warp speed week, where warp speed was increased dramatically for everybody for a week or something like that. So they're playing with these kinds of ideas of like modifying the very nature of the game itself via these different tools. But either way, beyond that, you see a whole bunch of stuff for the MPE, little fixes here and there. And you also see pretty much all of the old accelerators are getting re-put in. And there seems to be some sort of rogue drone event in October that seems to be being, coming together.
It sounds like the Halloween event they usually do.
Well, usually for Halloween it's Crimson Raiders or Crimson Harvest.
By the way, guys, you should thank XYLYX Zenith for handing out 5 subs to you guys. That's so you guys can bypass commercials that Twitch puts up when you watch this channel and playback. That's a very nice thing to do. Super generous. He's done it before many times. Thank you.
Ash, sorry, Matt.
Yeah.
Ash, actually saying that would explain the dreads we saw that may or may not be Blood Raiders.
That's true. There are 2 dreads. One is named Test Dread and one is Friendly Test Dread. They are listed as Invader Precursor entities, so we're not sure. But at the same time, they also appear to have the statistics and operational value of like a Blood Raider dread. It has NOS and
the models for the gun and everything like that.
I the more I've thought about it, the more I think that what they've basically just done is copied and pasted over the Diamond Rats dread stats, just because it was a pre-built dread for them to use. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be used for any given thing. From what I read in the thing, it almost seems like the Triglavians are going to have their dreads maybe even at the Stellar Laboratory, because they're talking about how there's a battleship. Maybe not. I don't know. There's a battleship deploying stuff, and then there's other guards that we need to take care of. That's all I know.
The Stellar Laboratory seems too small a site. It's a 2 to 7 person site.
That's
It
true.
feels too small for a dread, but you never know.
We have no
Um,
idea what's happening, is what I'm trying to say.
Talking of that, Matt, do you want the image or is that too spoilery? Because someone's put the model.
No, I think, we could wait. There's
That's
no
fine.
rush to see it. Plus,
All
technically,
this-
I have to jump through hoops.
The one thing I will note is that like even the mimesis implants on Singularity right now are still named the Costanza name. So it's obvious there's at least one more iteration pass that needs to come down the pipe before Sissy's ready to go out. And it really looks like it's going to be like the October update.
I am waiting with bated breath for these trig implants. I want them so bad.
They are good. They're not great for use in fights, but just long-term battles, structure grinding, they're pretty good for.
All right, we're rounding out the show today, and I want to see Lichgrave here.
Hey.
Hi. All right, I want to introduce you guys to the newest member of Talking in Stations. His name is Lichgrave, and he is going to be doing an economic show. And I brought him here to talk a little bit about it, and then also tell us what's going on out there in the markets. But first of all, welcome to Talking in Stations, Lichgrave.
Hi, great to be here.
Let's see. Can you talk a little louder?
Test.
Yeah,
Test?
there you go. There you are.
There you go.
There you
Okay.
go.
Yeah.
Tell us about
Right.
yourself, like, where you've kicked around in EVE Online so people get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, I started out in 2012. I very quickly found myself in Nexus Fleet, so N3.
N3
Kicked
Coalition?
around for a little bit there. Yep. Kicked around for a little bit, dropped out of the game, came back, found myself in RVB, dropped out of the game, came back, found myself in a funny little high-sec group called Mission Ready Mining. Left the game, came back, kicked around, jumped in and out of nullsec blocks, and found myself now in wormhole space with a group called Einstein Rosen Brigade ERB. So yeah, I do a lot of market stuff on Twitch. I stream it, so there's probably some people who have caught that at some point. And yeah, that's it. As far as the new show, yeah. It's going to be me bringing on a whole bunch of guests. We're going to be going through all the different ways that people make ISK in this game, all the different ways that you can go through it. It's definitely going to be, I'm not going to say new player orientated, but it's definitely going to be more educationally orientated as to how to, how do you get set up here? What do you do? How do things work? And then tie it all in as to how that fits into the greater world of EVE, because I mean it is a really big world, and it's sometimes hard to see how one little person fits into that bigger picture, especially with all the talk that's happening these days.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's what we strive for here, is to have a cross section of voices, trying to open up the advanced gameplay for people who are wanting to climb up that ladder. And so that fits right into what the station is all about. It's a crossroads from different pilots, different experience levels, different sectors of gameplay. So it'll be nice to see this. I'm a big fan of the economic stuff as well. And we'll probably start this next week. When's your first show going to happen?
TBA, but yeah, definitely within the next 2 weeks, most likely, depending on how quickly I can get people together. The first topic is already set up, so we're just gonna wait on production to get us, get us the visuals, get us the things that we need to actually get the thing going.
That's awesome. All right,
So
go ahead.
You're in the same corp as Gabby, right?
I am.
She's one of my favorite people.
Yes.
Oh,
she is
Gabby,
awesome.
are you serious? Love Gabby.
Yeah, Einstein Rosenberg Brigade. That's her group.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's funny. She's in Vegas. She always has a cluster of guys around her, like the like her boys, you know, there's like 6 or 7 of them that are always hanging out with her.
There's a good chance that I'm going to be part of that group this year too. So
right, so you're
I've
going to
definitely
be
been part
plus-
of Gabby's boys.
N plus 1, right? Anyway.
Yeah. So you're going to be there, right?
Yeah, looking forward to being there. So I'm
Yeah.
going to be helping out Streamfleet as well, because under the table I am a streamer.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Cool.
know, not just participating as a pilot, but also, you know, working in the backgrounds.
Okay, welcome Teddy and Sarah Paticane. How you guys doing?
I would like to also give props. Einstein Rosen Brigade have been around forever, and they've like always been the same sort of new player friendly, and they're great.
They're a wormhole group, right?
Yeah, we are a wormhole.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, let's turn and look at the market here for a second. I have on screen the Plex index. I guess I don't know if that's an index. I may be throwing financial terms out I don't understand, but this is basically where Plex is. And as you can see, it spiked up a couple days ago when the lifting of Blackout was announced about a week ago, and then it just plateaued, which is really interesting.
Well, people would have bought enough Plex to start them off. It'll be about the same time next month, I think, is where we're going to see where Plex is going to settle.
Well, I don't know if Plex ever settles, but yeah, it did kind of spike up pretty hard. I think it went up immediately, like 400,000 per, which is a lot.
I saw near a 600 at one point. It was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, it was a huge spike.
It really sounds like an initial gut reaction.
Yeah.
It's like these are the people who heard Blackout is gone and have immediately come back. As that news proliferates, we'll probably see a steady increase again, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. All right. So is there anything that you've been looking at this week or today that's interesting out there in the economy? And if you haven't, that's totally fine. You'll start on, next week or whenever.
Yeah, there's not much, it's just it's really been business as usual. No major spikes. I think it was the full right C28 climbed up, it crashed, and now it's spiking back up again, which is kind of weird, but past that, yeah, it's been kind of business as usual.
Nesters are rising in price by quite a lot.
This is true. Yeah, this is true. I believe that was because of Blackout. So Nesters have gone up like crazy, and the meta shifts in wormhole space have moved because of it. It used to be double Nesters or Nesters running C5s. Now you're starting to see a lot more Lashak fleets, 3-4 chaining Lashaks. So yeah, it's definitely taken its toll. So
I think that another pressure causing an increase in Nesters is that they are A, used in great quantity in invasions, and B, lost frequently.
Yeah. So, with the return in Blackout, and I'm not entirely sure on the mechanics of how SOE, LP, and nullsec work, but I know there is a connection there somewhere. So we may see a drop in price again, may not. I do know the recon ships that were specifically set up for D-scan being kind of, important, are dropping in price because that's just how it goes. The mechanic is no longer necessary, so there is no necessity for those ships, and so they go down the drain. As opposed to the specific recons that use the cynos, those I believe are gaining in price right now. So
those would be the recons. So let's try the Eagles one. Oh, that's a hack. What is the Caldari recon?
Falcon, Pilgrim, Arazu, and
the Rook. Well, the Rook is the other one, but
Hugin,
that's the one.
Not to be confused with Mutant. Okay, well, I was looking at the
or
large
Rapier.
spikes.
I think it's Rapier.
Falcon is
Rapier is the cloaky one. Sorry,
Rapier?
Rapier's the cloaky
Rapier
one.
is. Yep.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, there you go. I mean, there's that jump. There's that initial jump when the cyno changes were announced, and
It's
then
like a heartbeat, right? It's like it's a huge spike.
yeah, it definitely looks like a cardiogram. You just see that
boom, boom.
bump. Yep.
It seems to have stabilized after that. The market's very reactionary to these changes. There's such significant changes that I think people are startled by them and focus on the economic repercussions and try to jump in and try to make, ISK. But I think it happens too fast and it's overblown. And that's why you see in graph after graph that we were looking at, it seems to stabilize after the initial shock. The long-term trend, though, is to be determined. But if demand,
it's the same. It's the same with Plex. Like the way Plex went. The moment Blackout the moment it got announced on G Fleet, it was just shifting thousands of units, and then I think, as I said, if people are going to buy up enough Plex to run them for a month or two, and then the next time they come to refresh, that's when you're going to see the sort of stabilizing price. I think at now we're in a holding pattern with Plex as people have got enough to keep them going for a week, for a month or so, and then when it comes around again, how's the market going to react?
Market speculators and investors are also something to take into account. That initial jump in the price of the Falcon could have been from investment, not specifically people buying this out because it's suddenly becoming useful. It could be investors buying out for the purpose of holding on to see how the price increases, maybe generate a little bit of, a little bit of upwards trending movement. Try and force the price up a bit, which seems to have backfired. So,
I'll tell you
anybody
what.
who did that,
yeah. There's going to be a lot of wicked laughter on that show, isn't there?
there will be.
Yeah. One of the things that's interesting to me is that, and you actually mentioned this earlier, was the things that didn't spike when Blackout was announced that it was going to end were multiple pilot training certificates called MPTCs for short. Those are what players use in order to train a second character on an account. And those are heavily favored by people who have multiple accounts and are platforming. They're scaling their gameplay. So they don't have just one character or one account. They start to have 2 or 3 accounts. And then they start to want to train 2 or 3 characters at the same time on each account. And that's especially useful for people who do skill farming, which is basically having characters just accrue skills, and then you scrape those, put those into large injectors, and you sell the injectors. So the MPTC didn't spike on that news, and neither did skill injectors that I can tell.
Well, I think the more important thing to be kind of observing would be it didn't dip during the blackout. It looks relatively stable. Actually, it looks extremely stable, even during the blackout. So, but then at the same time, you have to take into consideration that this can be purchased directly from the New Eden store.
Mm-hmm.
So, while sales may not have changed on the market, that doesn't mean that overall purchasing of the item didn't change.
I can also see it being a case of it being tied to Plex, and a lot of the people that use MPTCs are people who do like skill farms or run multiple characters of the same tune. Most people I know of don't use MPTCs. They'll stop the training queue on one tune and start on another to get up to the relevant skills and then trade it over again. They don't train multiple characters at once. That's the norm, shall we say.
See, I was under the understanding that they used MCTs because an MCT costs less than a full subscription.
It's marginal. It's 485 Plex to 500.
Yeah, it's very close. It's extremely close. But it becomes cheaper if you look at if you go through the New Eden. Even injectors become cheaper if you go through the New Eden store and you get the 10-pack. As opposed
there's
to
also the
purchasing on
scale.
market.
Yeah,
and there's also scale.
The other thing is by doing MPTC, you can't log that account in as well as having another character on that account open at the same time. So if you want it for dedicated alts for like eyes or something, it makes sense. But if you're just doing it for another alt, there's very little value to having that ability.
Well, it's all very interesting. Financial news, you can get it at Talking in Stations and also on Lichgrave's own streaming channel. What is that channel called?
It's twitch.tv/LechGrave. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So he'll be doing a lot of demonstrating on his station. And then every once in a while, we'll have him on Talking in Stations doing an update to let us know where the markets have been going, and also to teach players how to make money in this game, which is one of the key driving factors. It's the grind here.
Oh, yeah.
All right, thanks, Lichgrave. All right, guys, we're going to wrap up, but it is Friday, so we're kind of relaxed. If you guys want to bring something up, now is the time.
I do want to revisit the whole thing about the emergent conduits that we talked about a little bit yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So there are these emergent conduits that show up as an anomaly throughout any system in HiSec. Every morning, systems are either infected or they're not. If they have emergent conduits, then you can go in, clear them. They take about 6 to 10 minutes to clear, depending on how many people and how well armed you are. And then there's a 1 minute lull in between. There's 4.5 million ISK per person and 300 LP per person for up to 3 people before it starts to become split. And the loot and salvage is pretty darn good. So after 3 hours of doing it with me and a couple other guys, I myself made approximately 90 to 100 million ISK per hour. And after that, my buddy continued to roll them for another 3 or 4 hours before he realized how long things have gone by. Which brings me to an interesting thought, which is that, so the flow theory is something that CSP Hilmar even mentions. And so flow theory is this idea that if a person is doing something that they perceive as being challenging, not even necessarily hard, but challenging, but that they're good at it, they're able to deal with it, and it's testing their technical expertise, that one can enter into a state of flow, which is a very positive state in which you lose track of time. It's that in the zone feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it requires this sustained, challenging, yet capable effort. And what we're seeing here is this nice rhythm of 6 or 7 minutes on, 1 minute off. And even during that off time, you're salvaging as fast as possible because you're trying to get all this stuff done before the next site starts, so that way you can get to the next site and not lose any time. So all of this is just enough to keep you engaged that it actually helps people enter into the state of flow. And unlike other activities in Eve, because of the fact that it resets or they respawn every single minute, it allows you to just keep rolling them for hours. So I find it fascinating that they're putting this kind of content in. I mean, Invasions is also kind of have this with sites, especially if you're souling miners or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But for the first time in Eve, you can sit there and just zone out. I mean, not first time. Mission runners sometimes do this and stuff, but you can just get into this rhythm and just be making as much money as you want for a long period of time and feel engaged during that time and not just have it be an AFK activity.
Yeah. You can experience that with sports too. When I played basketball, you get to a certain state where you're not even thinking, your body's just moving, and your reflexes are reacting before you actually have put it together. It's I consider that a flow state too, and I'm sure a lot of athletes have it.
Yes, absolutely. It would be considered that. Basically, it requires a high perceived challenge and a high perceived skill, right? So there's this chart that basically says if it's low perceived skill, high perceived challenge, then you get anxiety. If it's low perceived challenge, high perceived skill, then it's relaxing, blah, blah, blah. But in that top right corner, that's the holy grail. That's flow.
Yeah. I've actually achieved it when I was a young person on a video game called Robotron. And what had happened there? So there was this Robotron at a corner market somewhere where I lived, and I started playing it, and I ended up just constantly winning new players. So it ended up just living forever. So I played it for 3.5 hours straight, and I kept letting people play it and die. And then I would work up but I was in a state that day of being completely undefeatable by the game. And then the game actually melted down and turned off. And that was the end of that game, unfortunately. So I killed a video game by playing it. And ever since then, I thought, I'm going to do this for a living. So I am going to be a professional video game player. And that is why I joined EVE Online.
And here we are.
End of story.
No. A lot of video games are designed that way. Like that's why a lot of people like Cuphead or even like Dark Souls. Like it gives you that correct amount of challenge. And I was actually talking with Hateless Gaming the other day or yesterday about this because he actually does like to him just soloing a miner is boring. So he will like triple box 3 different things at the same time, and that level of complexity helps him, remain engaged the whole time. He's nuts, by the way. I don't know if you've ever watched his stream. He does the craziest stuff. So he's been like triple boxing, soloing miners in like double Vargers and something else. He's crazy.
Vexer, you just solved the mystery of my childhood. So if you went over 255 guys in Robotron, the game crashed. So now I know. I didn't destroy the game. It just crashed.
The fantasy of your childhood has been completely shattered.
Vexer is actually a video game builder, so he's been around a long time, so he knows a lot about these video games. You can hang out and talk with him on Talking in Stations Public. He's around a lot, telling us about video games and how they're made and built and stuff like that.
Smart guy too.
Yeah, very smart. So Brisk.
Yes.
How are you doing?
Good.
You're not going to yell at me, are you?
I'm not today. I'm in a good mood, and I haven't been drinking, so it's fine.
Was that a drinking Brisk?
That was a drinking Brisk, also having to deal with Dirk. So, I was kind of just already.
Oh.
But
so you already had the static electricity building, and I just accidentally.
Oh yeah, you touched the third rail. It wasn't your fault. You did.
For those who don't know, we're being cryptic because we're all talking about Blackout. Had it ended, or it hadn't ended at that point, had it?
It had not ended at that point.
It was right before. It was like the hours before they said it ended. And we were there arguing about it, trying to be positive. At least the guys who were on the show were trying to be positive. And so there was a lot of tension anyway.
It didn't work, though. We tried.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
I was very triggered. I felt targeted. No.
Yeah. But that was it's always a hoot. If you guys want to have a good time and you don't mind drunks, open comms is
yelling at each other.
Yeah,
Yes.
It's quite funny. It's quite infuriating, and it's interesting how many different emotions you go through on that show. Not being on it, but just watching it. You go through. You want to bonk people over the head for being stubborn, and you want to give people hugs because they're jolly, and it just goes all over the place.
It shows every night, 9:00 Eastern, which is, I think, 0100 UTC. So come check us out. We're on.
Yeah. All right, Ashtarothi, what are you up to today?
Today is Friday, so I'm going to be doing probably some game development stuff. It's been an interesting week. As I said, we have now basically, our invasions have pushed into LowSec, and so yesterday was kind of more of a miscellaneous day, and then today's going to be more development day, and then we're going to hopefully get back into it, and next week going back into an armor doctrine. And there is a lot of buzz about us pushing further into the LowSec invasions.
Did you get I saw that you got jumped by PvPers? And
yeah,
you guys managed to kill one off, and
we actually killed 2. Well, technically, so we killed the Legion before the Balgorn showed up, which was nice. But we had wounded the other Legion, and it turns out that Zoria and crew killed it after we had left. So we technically got 2 kills thanks to the Triglavian assist.
Yeah. So Dirk McGurk says something hilarious here, because you're talking about Triglavians bringing capitals and starting to grow their own capital fleet, and so he says, "I wonder if Triglavians will be allowed to proliferate capitals like everyone else."
Well, they're building them like 8 at a time, so maybe.
They're slow compared to players. But that's really funny. I'd like to see Triglavians with their own super cap umbrella. That would be hilarious.
You go into an invasion and you go into an LowSec invasion and you're like, I'll just drop my apostle in the world or in the major. You go in and suddenly dreads like drop in. You're like, oh shit, bail.
Yeah. One other person I'd like to introduce to you guys is Teddy. How's it going, Teddy? Are you there?
Hello.
Yeah. It's we don't have much time left, but I did want to say I'm a big fan of listening to some of the stuff that you say when you're around talking in stations. So thanks for coming around. Appreciate it. You're actually from a wormhole group?
Yeah, I live in a 5-5 corporation.
Right now, some of the biggest action is that there are so many wormhole connections that you can get anywhere on the map relatively quickly if you are on top of it. What's your perspective on that?
It's honestly nice, to be fair. There's just massive chains going on everywhere now.
And have you guys seen or captured or interfered with like nullsec fleets going through there, or is that something that's just rare to see?
Our roaming fleets are usually not the size to contest those fleets, but
So
we've encountered them. But we usually just frag some sabers and then bail as fast as possible.
Yeah. How are these cyno changes that are coming? Are they affecting you at all? They don't, because you don't jump to cynos, do you? You either have them in system or you don't.
It makes it a bit more annoying to move capitals into your wormhole, because usually you just cyno onto the hole and then self-destruct.
Right. But how about on the other end of it, since you're kind of the you could say if you're in nullsec, you might be part of the hunter class where you're running around looking for things to destroy. Is there any
I
effect?
haven't encountered it yet, but from the corps I've spoken to, they seem to be enjoying it.
Yeah.
But how it just takes a little bit longer to escalate.
I was thinking about this. We've talked about this too off air, that if you look at the changes that CCP are doing, it may have nothing or very little to do with nullsec in general, but just trying to get more ships fighting, because that's probably the statistic they're looking at, is how many people are actually triggering these modules that tell us how much action is actually happening. And that looks like it's been on the decline for a while. We showed some graphs of like how destruction has gone down over time. Now, that could be that people are destroying less. It could also mean that the stuff they're destroying costs less to build, but we figure it's a factor of both things. And that's been declining for a while. And then if you look at how many ships are actually destroying each other, that's also been declining for a while, long before Blackout hit. So there seems to be like a slowing of activity that CCP is eager to kind of reverse. So if you look at all the changes, right? The drifters, the Blackout, the more access to wormholes, and now the cyno changes. If you take each one of those and think about it in the perspective of getting more fights happening, they all tend to make sense too. For instance, if you see a group of fight, if you see like a group of ships and you don't know whether you want to attack them or not, because you don't know if you're going to be jumped once you attack them, you can now be more confident that they're alone. And so you would take that fight, whereas before you might not, because you didn't want to take the chance.
I had this conversation. We've been talking a lot about this the last couple of days, because I've got all kinds of different people. So I've got a bunch of people that really don't like. I talked to a guy who's in a relatively small alliance, 400 people, owns some space in Pureblind. And I asked him, what do you think of the Blackout changes? Love it. What do you think about the cyno changes? Hate it. And I was like, well, why? And his whole thing was about the fact that he can't bridge in ships anymore to do an attack. And and that the problem is that if he's like roaming in and committing, that the response fleet will just drop on him or whatever. But the point I tried to make was, like, if you go into a system and you see that there's only one neutral and local, and you see that there's a dummy ratting, like, if you get him, you have him. Like, he doesn't have a cyno. You know what I mean? Like, you might be able to log in a Falcon, but you'll be able to see that, when it happens. So it goes both ways. But most importantly, what I speculated was he was complaining because if you roam, and I've heard this a lot, if you roam, you just don't find anything, right? You go 130 jumps without seeing anything. So I propose to you this challenge, or this thought. Is it possible that the reason why you can go 130 roams without running into anything is because everybody has magical teleportation devices, and therefore no one is traveling between point A and point B, and therefore there's no one to run into.
Well, let me back up just a second. I don't know how to answer that, but if you have a cyno that is only usable on certain ships, therefore you know the ships that you are fighting do not have cynos, then lifting Blackout becomes essential, right? Because now the idea that you don't know who's in system, you don't know if these guys have friends, will be solved by looking at chat and saying, okay, I see 2 guys in front of me. I see 2 guys in chat. There's nobody else in this system. And these ships are not able to bring in anybody else through a cyno, so I can take this fight. So it almost feels like Blackout might have been something to test before they got to this point where they put in this cyno change, and then Blackout can't really work with it, so you need to take that out in order to get a good analysis of what the cyno change is actually going to do. Will more people fight if they feel confident that there's not going to be an escalation?
I know that we've taken at least 2 fights so far in the last week in which we probably would have been a lot more sketchy about it if we had thought that there could have been a cyno.
Yeah, I don't know how powerful that fear is of being escalated on. I'm not an FC, so I wouldn't know. But it is an interesting
every
concept.
individual ship is an army, right? Every individual ship is potentially an entire army coming through. So it's like, there's a Vexor right there. Should I engage it? Well, I don't know. It might be a cyno. You know what I mean? Like everything is, I don't know. It might be a cyno.
Well, and then you have yours. So it's like, or whatever. Like, but yeah, you do have the surprise element, which to me is kind of interesting, right? Because a lot of the best fights in EVE have happened because of surprise elements. Those are when things are not expected and people aren't prepared to deal with what comes next. And then the people who are having the advantage may have the disadvantage, and it goes back and forth in that whole escalation theory. And now I think that whole climb is going to change. And you'll probably see some best practices form, but I honestly don't know if people will be more confident to take fights or less confident.
I think it'll open up the kind of fights that can be made, because it doesn't all just boil down to the same kind of end state.
Yeah, which is what's bothered me about EVE Online. People who've played as long as I have, who watch the game and stuff, things have become very clear on what's going to happen. Even fights tend to become more predictable. They're not completely predictable, of course. There's elements like today's non-fight was, it looked like Test was going to go into Fraternity space and take out their Keepstar, and that was going to happen, but that didn't happen because Fraternity scrambled and formed up strong or formed up big, and they were able to ward off Test, basically. Actually, we should talk about that. Test tried to split their forces to take, I'm reading this from an AAR, After Action Report. Test tried to split their forces to take the iHub, but only began moving with 3 minutes left until the timer. We were, and this is from the Fraternity point of view, we were racing to complete the timer before downtime, which was 32 minutes away. 32 minutes away from the timer. They warped all of the carriers and supercaps to the gate with 1,000 subcaps on their side. So there's a supercap fleet, a carrier fleet, and 1,000 subcaps sitting there. That is a huge form up. And like 500 to 600 of those were Munins. And so that's what kept Test from entering. But I think Test did end up entering right after downtime, because downtime is basically the game shuts off for up to 15 minutes. I think it's down to 7 or 8 minutes. And when it comes back on, it's a race to get into the game, because the more people you get into the game, the more advantage you have, because it's basically a timeout. And so if one group is blockading, in this case, Fraternity is blockading the gate, and Test is on the other side of that gate. They're not going to jump into that fight because they'll get annihilated. They'll be disorganized when they basically decloak, and they'll be targeted, and it's very hard. You don't do that as an FC. You don't jump into that unless you're like Vince Draken or somebody can jump into a brawl and actually win it. But when the timeout happens, everybody has to reassemble on both sides. So that threat on the other side of the gate is no longer there for Test. And so Test actually jumped through and got 3 fleets of Munins in, but they decided not to engage the Keepstar, and the Keepstar survived. That's, I believe, what happened there, and I could be wrong. All right, so we're all over the place. This is a risk. How's it going, Bigga?
How are you?
Good. I'm not familiar, but go ahead and tell us what you.
I just wanted to make a comment on the how the cynos affect PvP, and I think that it feels to me like CCP is kind of wants to protect the new bro experience a little bit or make it better, and I think that. It seemed like the battleship was really weak, let's say, in low sec, because if you're just a small gang of new players, let's say you only have 20, 15 guys, you never would take that fight. You're like, oh, there's a Vector there? Nah. Or a Proteus. You'd be like, well, we're not going to jump that Proteus because they're just going to cyno caps on us. So
right.
I feel like you kind of you were stuck to like, well, let's go to a large complex in faction warfare space because you can't light cynos in it. But I think making it harder to light cynos will kind of open up that the cruiser through battle cruiser low sec fighting. I think it totally will help because you will take that fight more. You're like, Proteus, let's do it. Let's dunk him.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see which way it goes. But I think the extended thought that we were having was, well, Blackout would make that situation still confusing because you wouldn't know who's in system. And so without Blackout, the cyno changes make a lot more sense in that respect, the respect that you just said. So it'll be very interesting to see how that works on its own. Nice to meet you, Bigga. Cable and Lich Grave. Thanks, guys. Ashtarothi, Seraph, and Teddy. Thank you guys very much for showing up. And thank everybody for watching. We will call it a day and a week and move on to the Sunday show. So stay tuned for that. We are going to have a show this Sunday. We have opted to not have seasons anymore, so we won't be taking breaks. We'll just cycle out staff here and there to keep the shows going. So that's good news for people who like the podcast and didn't like 2 weeks of no talking in stations. I hope you guys appreciate that. Remember, if you like the work that we do and you want it to keep going, help us out by giving us ratings and subscribing and following and telling your friends about it. Give us reviews on iTunes. It helps people find us. And always, of course, if you are able to, subscribe to Twitch, or the direct route for the funding for the podcast is through Patreon, and that is Patreon/Matterall. And you can donate there. We have a great group of people you would be joining that have supported us for months and months and months, and mostly years. A lot of them have been around for years, and we're really grateful to those guys. So because there's no break, there's no giveaway. I'm not giving away a Titan, but maybe we'll just do that instead of waiting for a season finale, because that whole thing was a little bit artificial. But it was nice to take a break, and so I will be taking a break, and other people will keep things going while I'm gone. So just so you know, because you're all part of the Talking Stations family, we're up to just about 3,000 people on the server, which is pretty cool. And we're going to have a meeting called State of the Station for the people who put all this together for you. And at that meeting, we'll basically talk about what we've done, what our analytics look like. Are we doing a good job? What are our indicators of doing a good job? And are we serving the people that are fans well? And then we will talk about the future and what direction we want to take the material towards to keep it interesting for us, but also to keep you guys engaged and that sort of thing. So we'll have that meeting, and we'll make some announcements that are public after that. Okay, that's everything. I want to thank you guys for showing up today. Nice big number there. And I'm going to go ahead and send you over to Blue Bright Squidget. I don't know who that is, but looked like fun. So here you go.
I think
Thanks.
She's a stream fleeter, I'm pretty sure.
Stream Fleet, yes.
She's come back recently, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay, good. Well, we'll welcome her with 130
that
people.
sounds right.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon. Take care. All right, just 1 second while this raid happens. Well, she has blue hair. All right, there you go. Okay, guys, see you later.